The story of Australia's First Peoples is the oldest continuing human story on Earth. Through countless generations of songlines, to connection with country and spirit, to resistance, struggle and survival, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander story is vast, inspiring and always evolving. This podcast series presents a collection of First Peoples voices, sharing their experiences, achievements, hopes and beliefs. These are the real stories of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia. Hi, I'm Mayra Sonta and you're listening to the Real podcast series. In this episode, I chat with Yatu Widders Hunt. Yatu is the current senior consultant at communications and public relations company Coxnor Ridgeway and also the founder and curator of popular social media platform Australian Indigenous Fashion. I would like to welcome Yatu Widders Hunt. You are up to so many fantastic things. I should probably warn everyone that Yatu and I have been friends for many years and are very like-minded kind of comms chicks, I suppose. Would you describe it as that? Our shared love of media, comms,
yes,
communicating?
Media, comms, politics and fashion are our little anchors, I think.
Ooh, I think you're more political than I am. I don't get through all of the political bios quite the same way that you do, but I love getting the notes from you on those. So very exciting time with an election looming. It'll be over by the time everyone listens to this, but we're in the week of the federal election.
Yes, there's a lot of heightened excitement this week. So I'm not sleeping as much and I plan my TV schedule for Saturday already.
Okay, so what is the plan for Saturday?
Well, I'm going to go vote and get my sausage sandwich.
Democracy
as is
sausage.
My right, yes, and duty. And then I'm going to lock myself in the house and watch political commentary for the rest of the night.
And who do you watch?
I watch ABC. Yeah, I flirt with the commercial networks a little bit, but I always come home to ABC. Yeah.
Very nice. And so this is a tradition you would do every time there's an election?
Yeah, I love to watch the coverage. I mean, even as a teenager, I used to hold election night parties before I could vote.
Right.
Yeah, with my two friends that also wanted to come around and eat pizza and pretend to understand what the results were about. But
why do you think you're so driven into politics? Passionate about it?
Oh, my dad was a land rights activist for a long time and always grew up in a very political household, and he was involved in the Aboriginal Arts Board and other things. So I always sort of just hung around that kind of scene and went to a lot of rallies as a child. So I think it's just in my DNA.
And it's so important, isn't it, to understand our rights and be a part of, the movement to have our voice heard democratically, whether that's at land council level or state federal elections. It's just, you can get disheartened at times, especially as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, but you obviously believe in the power of it.
Yeah, no, I've always been fascinated by it, and that's sort of what sparked my interest in the comms world, actually, because I got really interested in speech writing and political communications and how do you sway a population to sort of engage with an idea. And that's really what got me into the media and comm space, was an understanding of watching elections, really, and how people convinced each other to vote for someone or back someone or get interested in what was going on in the country.
And we're both at UTS, but I did the boring comms one and you did the more political kind of public policy. Not boring, but...
Same but different.
Same, different.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you kind of knew the brainiacs that were going to do that course, that they were destined to have careers in politics or comms or surrounded by that.
Yeah.
How did you find UTS?
I really loved UTS, and I think it was, like, for me, that course was really a good blend of media, communications and PR, and how that plays out in the NGO world and the political world and to evoke social change. And I think it was really practical. I remember, stories of some of my journalism friends being dropped at Circular Quay and gone, right, you've got 2 hours to go and interview someone and write a story. And I just always thought, wow, that's a lot more exciting than some of my other friends' courses. And I think it really did just set you up to get straight into the workforce and be a doer.
Because they're real life skills being kind of dropped in the moment, isn't it? Just off you go.
It really is. Although my first day of my very first full-time job, I didn't know how to fax something. And I thought, oh my God, I've been to uni for all of these years and I'm standing like a muppet trying to work out how to use a fax machine for about an hour. But
Wow.
other practical skills have been put to use.
And now, that lesson's probably helped with social media because it's moving so quickly that,
Yes.
we're constantly having to learn new ways of doing things. It's the new norm.
I know. I mean, fax machines are no longer in use in the office, and certainly it's about continually learning and reskilling. And I think, the Instagram world and the Facebook world wasn't really talked about that much when I was at university. So it's definitely something I'm trying to engage with now and teach myself about. So I'm kind of jealous of the guys going through UTS at the moment because I think it's such a major player, not just in political comms, but in campaigns and broader media life.
Absolutely. And tell us a bit about your kind of comms journey to here. So uni, and then you've been on to do what?
Soon as I left uni, I watched a lot of West Wing, and I wanted to be a press secretary. So I moved to Canberra and learnt pretty quickly it was not as glamorous as Washington. But I did a long time in Canberra working as a graduate and then in media and comms roles. So I worked in the environment and sustainability space and then the mental health space. And after that, I sort of just wanted to do something a bit more creative. As much as I learnt in government, I felt a little bit constrained, not being able to use social and a lot of those other tools. So I freelanced for a long time where I met you, working for NITV, and I worked for Koori Mail, and I did some work for NCIE, and sort of found my way into an Indigenous agency, which I'd never even thought would exist when I was a student, that Indigenous agencies doing comms and policy and research would even exist. So I was really lucky to turn a freelance client into a full-time job. So I'm currently working at Coxon or Ridgeway, which is another Indigenous agency.
I know, what a career path. So, and we're not all that old.
No, we're very young.
So that's only a small bit of our kind of career trajectory to date.
Yeah.
Has there been a favourite part of that journey that you thought, this speaks to me, this is what I want to do?
I think my first year, and I love working in an Indigenous agency, but particularly my first year really opened up my eyes thinking, wow, this is an actual job. Like, we can work for our community, use comms for social change, but be part of a big corporate entity and all the great benefits and things that come with that. So for me, it was a really exciting time to go, yes, I can fulfill my political nerd and work on the big policy and review projects, but I also have access to more creative opportunities in the corporate space and in the creative space. So for me, just that first year at Ridgeway, I thought, wow, okay, this is like a dream job for me.
And how do you find that kind of balance between, one day you could be out in community having conversations direct face-to-face, and then the next you're in a government office, and then the next you're having a corporate client conversation. Is it the variety that you love, or there's different kind of hats you'd have to wear?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a very diverse range of work that we all do. And I know you're in a similar space as well. But I think that is the thing that's most exciting about it, is that we're not only able to sort of talk to government from a policy angle, but we're also in a really privileged position where we get to represent voices of community and actually go and see and experience things that are happening on the ground. And I think it actually makes it a more powerful comms experience. So whether we're doing a campaign or providing policy advice, we've actually been out, seen and experienced it. And not a lot of other consultants get to do that. And I think it's a privilege to work in community, but it also strengthens the work that we all do.
Yeah, and we're very grateful that your passion and expertise is out there kind of doing that work. So keep it up. You spoke a little bit about the, having that creative outlet as part of it. And I know you mentioned we met at NITV doing a very fun show around the traps.
Didn't win a Logie yet.
No.
But hasn't won a Logie.
We're going to have to put the band back together if we're going to do a Logie. But that was a couple of years of great, I think it started, you were doing some of the social media of the program, and then became one of the entertainment reporters, and then branched out into an entirely other program. So how was that time doing TV?
It was very exciting because, to be honest, I'd never done TV before, and I did actually start out behind the scenes doing the social media management, and all of a sudden I was, had this little segment. I think I did the events wrap-up to start with, getting my hair and makeup done and all that kind of stuff, and for me it was a very scary new world. having to be on camera. I've traditionally sort of liked being behind the scenes, and which is what drew me to being a press secretary and all those kinds of things, engineering what's going on. But I thought it was really exciting, and I think certainly it's helped me even now in, presenting and feeling more confident, and just being involved in something like that. You learn so much more about how TV shows are made and how the media works, and particularly an Indigenous network, which was kind of amazing as well, particularly being a lot younger and sort of having my mind opened up to all of these Indigenous-owned media corporations and organisations. I thought was really cool.
And how are you seeing the change in the Indigenous media kind of market?
I think it's definitely growing. I think, sadly, I think we haven't seen enough or support or amplification of Indigenous stories in the mainstream media. And I think we've reacted creatively and beautifully, as we always do, by just creating platforms such as this one to actually tell those stories. And I actually work with a young Aboriginal woman called Marley Silver, who started Titters for Titters.
She's amazing.
She's amazing. Which is all about telling the stories of empowered young Indigenous women. And we've got the traditional newspapers, we've got Indigenous X, we've got The Real, and I think that we're just seeing more diversification and an assertion of Indigenous stories to say, hey, this is really important, and if you're not going to make space for it, then we're going to create it. And I think that's really powerful.
It so is powerful, and you forgot to mention Australian Indigenous fashion in amongst all of those.
I was saving it up for
drum roll, please.
For the drum roll.
Super exciting, and a space that was, always going to take off. I think we're so grateful that you've thought, okay, there's a niche here in the market. We're great designers at many things over time, but there was just such talent out there. Creatively in the Indigenous fashion industry, and you've pulled it all together with the Instagram page. Tell us about kind of when you decided that this is something that needed to be done, and how it's kind of grown from there.
Well, I decided about nearly 2 years ago that I wanted to start an Instagram platform to showcase the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander fashion and design. And I sort of knew a little bit about what was going on in the space from being a journalist at NITV and around the traps, and also writing for the Koori Mail. I was really lucky I got to cover Australian Indigenous Fashion Week while I was working at the paper, and just got to see the breadth and depth of what was going on. And what sparked me to start the Instagram page is that I just got really frustrated. I kept saying, guys, there's so much happening. There's people in New York runways. There are Aboriginal people that are now graduating from fashion and design school. And everyone said, oh, we never see it. We never hear about that. And I thought, right, I'm just going to make a curated collage of everything Aboriginal fashion on a page and go, there you go. That's what it looks like.
Yeah,
so that's kind of what sparked me to do it. But I also think it's just something really fun. I love fashion. Growing up in a really urban area, it's also a way that I sort of reconnect and explore my own Aboriginality through really contemporary and creative ways. So I just wanted to do something to showcase what Aboriginal fashion looks like, and also to challenge a lot of stereotypes around what Aboriginal design and art is.
If anybody hasn't seen it yet, you definitely have to go and look along, because it's beautiful, gorgeously curated, gorgeous colours, and I'm learning so much about Australian Indigenous fashion. Kind of thought I knew a fair bit of what was going on, but you're really unearthing new talent. It's from right across the country, just stunning colours kind of come through. And I know it's led to some other kind of, you've curated events in the kind of Indigenous fashion space as well, such as the Chungu Festival, and been on panels. So it's opened up a whole different kind of world as well.
Yeah, I was really lucky for 3 years in a row. I got to curate the Chungu Indigenous Fashion Showcase at Voyagers Resort, which was amazing. So that involved sort of getting lots of different Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander designers to send their clothes to the event and do a little curated show, which really just showcased again the diversity of what was going on from different corners of the country. And recently I was really lucky to speak at the Legacy Summit, which was a responsible fashion summit held in Sydney for a lot of mainstream Australian fashion brands. So it was really exciting for me, having started just a little Instagram account, to suddenly be sitting next to Claire Press from Vogue, talking about an Aboriginal perspective on fashion and design. And I think that was something that was quite new for the sector, and probably new for the Indigenous fashion industry. So part of it is also about advocacy and trying to promote the idea that Aboriginal fashion and design is Australian fashion. And where is our voice in that conversation?
And how did that go?
It was really great, actually. I made a lot of great connections and hopefully inspired people to consider opportunities to work with Aboriginal artists and fashion designers. And I think there's a lot of interest out there, and it's something that's really uniquely Australian. So you look at a lot of these big Australian brands wanting to do something that connects to our landscape and our identity. So for me, the most natural thing to go to is, our strongest story and history and identity is Indigenous culture. And the other sort of intersection that I always find really interesting is everyone's talking about sustainable fashion. Everyone's into sustainability, which is really positive and fantastic. But I once heard Alison Page say, well, you can call it sustainable fashion or you can call it Aboriginal design, because Aboriginal design is by nature sustainable. We have 60,000-year tradition of designing in that way, caring for the earth, being mindful of resources, and a lot of Aboriginal designers are still working in that way. So I think the industry also has a lot to learn from us about what sustainability practice is when it comes to design.
It's kind of bringing back kind of those Indigenous ways of knowing and being into the mainstream, because they're kind of being pushed to the side.
Yeah.
It's happening with kind of food. You're kind of seeing the resurgence of having First Nations or native ingredients in recipes because of their health values, etc. And this is just another example of, we've been here forever and there's a reason for that, and you've got to listen to...
It's how we've survived.
Yes.
So, I really think that for me, part of that conversation at the summit was about responsible fashion and about sustainability. So it was just a really great opportunity to remind everyone that there is a wealth, in fact, tens of thousands of years of experience sitting at our doorstep that we can draw on to take into the future. And I always say the strongest sustainability of Australia is an Aboriginal story.
And what about perception? Are beautiful looking people as well. There's the modelling industry kind of aside that, and there wouldn't be as much representation. How are you kind of seeing that play out?
I think certainly modelling diversity is top of mind for a lot of fashion brands at the moment. And I know last year there was actually an Aboriginal modelling agency launched called Jira in Melbourne, and they did a small showcase down there. So not only are we seeing a lot of our Aboriginal models getting picked up by the big agencies, but we're now, again, like we're seeing in the media sector, organisations and entrepreneurs actually starting Aboriginal-owned businesses that promote that diversity and work with the mainstream brands. So I think when that sort of launched last year, I was really excited, thinking, okay, this is great, because we have to think that the fashion industry and the design industry is also much broader than just the making of clothes. It's about engaging and training makeup artists and lighting directors and photographers and modelling agents. So to see that kind of start to emerge was a really positive thing.
As an overall industry, I hadn't given that thought either. It's so true. And so you would have had a lot of relationships developed out of this, and Spawn, you've kind of mentioned a couple. Are there any tips on, who you got your eye on at the moment?
Oh, in terms of fashion designers.
Yes.
Well, I've recently made an online purchase the other day. I really love a lot of the work of Arki, the label. She is a beautiful contemporary artist based in Queensland, and she made these gorgeous little T-shirts that say Dreamtime in like these really bright colours, so I bought one of those cute tees. I love Law, the label, which is a fairly recent label that's launched, created by Shannon Brett, and they're just beautiful contemporary pieces with the most bright, stunning colours. And I've been a long-time fan of Magpie Goose, which is a social enterprise that works with art centres in the Northern Territory predominantly, and they're just so fun and exciting, and they make clothes for babies and men and women and older people and younger people. But I think that whole brand is really about fun, and that's what I kind of like about those labels that I've just mentioned, is that it's also showing that as a people we are fun and cheeky and contemporary and colourful, and I love to see that expressed in fashion.
And there's quite a few kind of social enterprises popping up. It's creating jobs for our mob in remote places, utilising kind of those cultural and artistic tools, but in new ways, and then creating businesses. It's really exciting. Yeah,
and I think I went to the Darwin Aboriginal Art Fair a few years ago, and I think certainly going and seeing some of the stalls of the art centres, textile art is really growing, because I think a lot of people these days, particularly international visitors or people travelling, don't necessarily have, the funds or the space to buy a beautiful big artwork as much as you might want one. But textile art is a really accessible way to engage with Aboriginal art and story. It's also something you can use and wear every day. So you're wearing culture, you're wearing storytelling. And I think that's really a space that people want to move into. And I know that there's a lot of great initiatives, particularly in remote Australia, where there are sewing classes being held and printmaking happening. And we're just seeing so much more collaboration between fashion designers, fashion brands, and some of our beautiful artists as well.
Beautiful. Now, Linnell Young, earlier this year, there was a visit in Melbourne from Anna Wintour.
Yes, I saw that.
I saw that and I was excited, and I wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, I was so stoked. I mean, I've been following Linnell for a couple of years. I actually had reached out to her once to be part of a Jungu show because I've always been a big fan of her work. She's another person that really promotes sustainability and slow fashion. And I think it's amazing that when we have an international visitor, a really influential fashion icon, if you like, have the opportunity to meet and understand a little bit more about what we're doing in Australia. I think Linnell, as a young Indigenous person, as a creative person, someone who promotes cultural values as well as design values. I think she was a great person to connect with Anna Wintour and a great ambassador for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander fashion sector.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, what's next for Australian Indigenous fashion? So it's going gangbusters,
Yes.
getting so many likes. How many are you at currently?
I'm nearly at 16,000.
Whoa!
Yes.
Do you feel pressure?
I do, because I work alongside some mainstream PR agencies, so I'm constantly going, am I a micro-influencer yet? Am I?
At what point do you become a micro-influencer?
I think I've got to get into the 20s, but, okay. They're probably sick of me going, can I get representation?
Well, the real guys, make sure you go out there and like it if you don't already, because we need to
Please
get
help
you
me become an influencer.
And what do you think about that kind of social media and being influencers and the power of, voices on such platforms?
Well, I feel, I think it's a great platform. As we know, our communities use Instagram and Facebook at higher rates than any other community. So I think it's a great way to promote our businesses and connect with each other. But I also think it's a great way to reach a much broader audience. And we talked a little bit earlier about, not seeing enough Indigenous stories in the mainstream media. I think we're seeing a lot of social media platforms springing up, as well as mainstream media infrastructure, to really be a way to share those stories. And Instagram seems to be a great way, particularly in the fashion industry. It's very visual. People like to scroll through, buy things, look into websites. So I think it's very exciting, although I do feel a little bit embarrassed being in my late 30s calling myself a social media influencer. But
don't you dare.
It's never too late.
So are you looking to have maybe a website or house lots of people under one place where they can do online shopping, or bring any live events from it, or any more speaking engagements?
I've really thought about that in the last few months. I've also been listening to I get a lot of messages from people, and a lot of the messages I get about, I love this stuff and I just want to be able to buy it. And a lot of these labels do have stores online, but I have been thinking about an opportunity to create an online marketplace where people can sell Aboriginal fashion and design items to the broader public. I mean, a lot of these ranges are small. They are made in remote areas. So I think if I can help be a connector point to an audience and a market, that would be amazing. But I also really want to use it as an advocacy platform to, I guess, through a visual way, promote what Aboriginal art and design looks like, and just spark thinking in other people. So if someone goes, hey, I want to do a collaboration with an Aboriginal art centre, or, the big Australian Fashion Council, mainstream peak body, starts considering, what can we do? What kind of role can we play in this space? Then I think that would make me really happy, just to challenge thinking and start some positive relationships.
It makes me happy that this was just something that frustrated you, and now here we are, and here you are, 16,000 likes later, doing panels, having, key conversations and advocating on behalf of this sector and our people and business more broadly as well. So congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's a kind of natural extension as well. I mean, Aboriginal art is, our number one international art export. So I think it makes sense to explore other ways we can connect with that, and particularly where we are not to be too a political nerd girl about it, but particularly where we are in Australia at the moment, having some really important conversations around, voice to parliament and other platforms that we are considering. There's a lot of serious conversation going on, and I think fashion and art and design and comedy are other ways to complement that, and also for people to engage with Aboriginal culture and learn about who we are and feel proud about how that's part of the Australian identity. So as silly as it might sound, I think those things are really important in encouraging social change and encouraging people to think about what Indigenous Australia looks like and how it's part of everybody's story.
What does the real Australia mean to you?
The real Australia to me means truth. It means reflecting and accepting the truth of our story, but it also means being open and warm and generous to allow that story to include many voices, whether that's people who have newly arrived to Australia, the stories of our ancestors. And I think that's one of the most unique things about the real Australia, is that there are a multitude of stories, but I think together we actually fundamentally share the same values.
So tell us, what do you think is unique about the Aboriginal experience in Australia?
Oh, that's a very big question. The best way I can answer it is probably through some of the learnings that I've had in my professional life. And I think growing up in an Aboriginal family and with an Aboriginal worldview, you realise how connected we are, how everything in our life is interconnected, whether that's spiritual health, connection to land, family, co-design. And the more I've gone on in my professional life, I've realised how important that is to the Aboriginal experience, and how we actually just operate and think so differently to the model that we live in today. So, when we work on projects about health, we're talking about, 5 or 6 or 7 different things. It's so holistic, it's so engaging. And I think that actually creates better results for community. But being anchored in that tradition of seeing everything as part of a whole, being part of something bigger than yourself, I certainly think is something that we bring to our professional life, and something that we can offer clients and offer friends and offer other businesses. And I actually work inside a big advertising agency, and it's so interesting listening to some of the new theories on how to do things, and we're sitting there going, no, that's just an Aboriginal thing. That's just, we always do co-design, we always do collaborative decision making, we always do human-centered design. So I think it's a real privilege actually to have that worldview, knowing that we're all connected and the land, spirit, identity, culture is one thing. And I think that's a really powerful and exciting thing to bring into business. And I think others are actually starting to see the benefit in that view as well.
Yatu Widders Hunt, thank you very much for coming to have a chat with us. We
Thank
love
you.
you. Keep up the great work.
And thank you for my very stylish, I'm wearing a real T-shirt. So you may see that on Oz Indigenous Fashion very soon.
Boom. Didn't even need to plant that one, but thank you, darling. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Real podcast series. The Real is an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander digital media platform produced by 33 Creative. This episode was recorded in Sydney on Gadigal country. Produced by Jake Keane and Marguerite Barbara. Music production by Jimbler. For more stories and podcasts, visit the-real.com.au/podcast.